Cool. And a very good morning or good afternoon to everyone listening in, depending on which part of the world you're listening in from. It is the 2nd of February 2024, UX Research Call number, was it 34? Yes, it is 34. The purpose of this call is actually a very special call because we have Colin from Etta Wallet here, and we also have Carlos. And I'd like you both to just, you guys already both connected with each other. And then I also connected with Carlos at a separate event. So, yeah, if you guys would both like to introduce yourselves, I think you both have, it's so nice to see you both coming together. Etta Wallet has been around the Bitcoin design community for a while. So I'd love to give this project a boost. And it's so nice that Paulos and you connected. So Colin, if you want to introduce yourself and then Paulos as well, and then get going.
Hi, everyone. I think I'm familiar with everyone on this call. And I also met Paulos a few days ago. So that's really, really good. But I've also seen him in different circles in Oslo at the HRF conference and a few other places as well. But I'm happy to be here again. My name is Colin Rukundo. I have been working on Etta Wallet. It's a open source Lightning wallet, mobile wallet, and it uses LDK under the hood. I've also extensively used the Bitcoin design community and all their resources as well. So I'm happy to be here in a sense to see how this can contribute to a different kind of project and help them in some way or the other. So happy to be here once again.
Thanks, Colin. Hi, my name is Paulos, a marketer, and I am also a technology professional. I worked on infrastructures as a sysadmin and sysengineer for close to a decade, recently transitioned into marketing, and now working closely with the Bitcoin Innovation Hub as an advisor as well as a volunteer to help launch their new platform, which we hope to talk about today.
Amazing. Sorry, my computer I had way too many tabs open here before closing tabs as we speak. 1 second. Okay, cool. The purpose of this call is to really to help see if there's some synergy between what BTC Hub would like to achieve as well as Etta Wallet. Paulos, we met at an event, and Paulos works with BTC Africa Hub, if I remember correctly. Do you want to maybe share a little bit about the hub and what it does and who it works with?
Sure. So the Bitcoin Innovation Hub, the URL, like you were correct, is BTC Hub Africa, but the actual organization is the Bitcoin Innovation Hub. It was founded by Meron Estefanos, who is a human rights activist who's worked very closely with Eritrean refugees for a couple decades now, where vendors can then bring their products online and sell them to places all around the world, either B2B or B2C.
Perfect. I got kicked off, but I'm back again. So okay, cool. So and we have Colin has a wallet which has been built out completely using resources from the Bitcoin design community. And I guess the goal of the call would be to understand, if there could be any synergy brought together in Colin's wallet as well as using the wallet to possibly provide for this specific group of people, which Paulos is working with. Paulos, what would be, and I'm just taking some notes over here. I made a whole bunch of questions before our call. So if I'm not looking, it's only because I'm taking notes. What would be the ideal outcome for you in terms of collaborating on this project? What would you like to see? What would be the ideal scenario?
Thanks for that question. I guess from a technical perspective, it would be a way for us to connect a wallet to our BTC Pay server where we host our shops. So individuals who have shops or vendors who have shops on our platform would then be able to connect to a self-custodial wallet. That would essentially be the technical goal there. And from I guess a non-technical perspective, again, as I mentioned earlier, having vendors accepting payment in Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin format, the wallet, the way they would do that would be through the Etta wallet.
Has this group of people, I'm just gonna write this here, has this group of people ever used a Bitcoin wallet before? What wallets are they using, or would this be completely new for them?
So some vendors have been trained and are using wallets currently. There were a total of, I want to say, 175 students in the first couple cohorts at the Innovation Hub. The hub recently opened in June of 2023. And in terms of what wallets they're using, I would need to confirm with Meron to find out exactly which wallets she's been training them on. And so let me get back to you with that answer so I don't give you guys the wrong answer.
No worries. No worries. Cool. You've been really close to this group, and first, just anyone, feel free to dive in and ask questions. Before the call, I just created a list of questions to get more of an understanding. Carlos, what do you think is the biggest problem that they face? And this is going to be a very direct question. Is they're currently using wallets, so why would you specifically using Etta wallet be better for them versus using the current wallets that they are sort of using and playing around with?
Yes. So can you come back with that question? You would like me to answer what exactly? Why the Etta wallet?
Yeah, why do you think Etta wallet might be a solution for them? I mean, are currently using other wallets at the moment. What is it that you think about these wallets that are not specifically meeting their needs?
Yeah. So I think maybe we should backtrack a little bit here in terms of what wallet or why they should use the Etta wallet versus another wallet.
Yeah.
I think the goal truly is to educate these users and give them a vocational skill. I think it matters not so much which wallet they use. I think there's an opportunity here to work with Colin because personally, Colin is from Uganda. Colin has built a wallet already. The idea originally was for us to create our own wallet. And from there, we believed that the essential need would just be a wallet that has multiple language abilities. I know that the Etta wallet does have that capacity to include any number of languages. So initially that was the idea of working with Colin to create a wallet or use his wallet and have it be able to be translated into Swahili or Tigrinya, which is a common language with members of the Innovation Hub. But aside from that, maybe we should do more research with regards to one wallet versus the other wallet. But again, the main goal would be to give them trainings and then get them to using a wallet in general. So.
Colin, I think that sounds good to your ears since is Swahili your native language?
Yes and no. In some ways, yes, I do know Swahili, but it's not my native language. Yeah, so we don't speak Swahili in Uganda predominantly. We mostly, some people speak it, some people don't, but yeah, it's widely spoken in Uganda as well.
Gotcha. So the biggest lift it feels would be the translation of the actual wallet into the how would you say, into their native language.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the challenge here would be the fact that I'm not sure about the numbers that the Bitcoin Innovation Hub yet, or how the demographics look like, but I do know that it might help a tiny bit if you localize it to the point where by using the wallet in their normal working languages, so like Swahili, Luganda, Tigrinya, like it would make sense at that point. But yeah, I mean, I feel like if you think about it, most wallets today can, if you think about other open wallets like say Galloy, they all have an option to actually like contribute towards the translation of the wallet, same as Blue Wallet as well, which has no Lightning currently. But I do get the use case here being the fact that they want to integrate Lightning, allow their users to use that BTC Pay server instance. Is that correct, Paolo?
Correct.
Yeah. So for very many reasons, I guess there are many ways you could go about this. But if Etta Wallet can in any way like help with that process, because I think what the whole idea for Etta Wallet was initially to be like a foundational base for anyone who wants to build a wallet of their own. And the fact that you had thought about making your own wallet as an innovation hub means that it's a need that you come up with, and you believe that also based on your matrix of ideas that came from the last conference, I would see how it being very modular and able to like change and be molded would actually help the innovation village. So innovation hub rather. So I think that, I don't know, I'm not sure, but I do think maybe this might be helpful in some way.
Daniel's asked a question here in the chat. Daniel, also you feel free to speak as well, but would you like me to read out your question, or okay? Or would you like to ask it yourself?
Hello. I
Yes.
was just muted because I had a very loud background here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I was just wondering about, because I've been running into this issue myself when testing, building self-custodial wallets with Lightning. It's great when you're set up and got a channel that's got sufficient liquidity and stuff. Then payments are close to free. But before you reach that stage, it can be quite cumbersome and expensive. I've had instances where opening and closing channels, or getting ready basically, it can be costing in the order of $5 to $10. So I just wondered, how would costs like that affect, this population and these people you want to work with?
Yeah, if I could, I guess, take a stab at that. Opening a channel, as you guys know, is super expensive at this time. It may cost more than $10 even, and I don't know how feasible that is for vendors. As I mentioned, I know most people that were working with the Innovation Hub may have already opened some channels. So we could see if how many of those exist, how many of them are vendors, and as Colin mentioned, give him those numbers and share those numbers with you all. And I can follow up with that information after the call, as I think, as you mentioned, it would be an important thing to know at this point, given the cost for opening a wallet or opening an account or a channel at this moment.
Yeah, that's fair to hear from people directly how it impacts them. No, I'm just curious generally because, I had been a little bit blind to this problem myself. I've sort of been, oh yeah, Lightning fixes the fee problem. But, I'm also open-minded, like, could there be other solutions? Yeah, what's beyond this problem? How do we get past it or around it? So I'm really curious to learn from you all what you find.
Yeah, and maybe just to jump in here, supplement what Daniel is saying. Self-custodial Lightning has a lot of pitfalls, and very many things would go wrong. In a healthy environment, channels, there's so many channel clauses and things happen, things you can't control. And the few also UX challenges that exist still within self-custodial Lightning, things around offline receive, and also just, again, unless you have an LSP, so for example, like maybe if the hub had their own LSP, it would make sense. But I would imagine, like Daniel said, that if we can map out a different, we can think of, if we think about the problem, we can sort of like come up with a solution for that might involve the wallet or not. But I think that would be something to consider. If you can think about like what is the actual issue. And I like what Paulo shared with me earlier, sometime during the week. There was issues they realized that they wanted to fix. I think coming from an angle of this is a problem and how can we approach it with a solution would make sense. That's what I think.
Just to get a bit of an understanding around the opening of channels and the actual practical effect it would have on these people. So let's imagine I'm a vendor and I'm from Uganda. I have my own shop and I'm selling, I don't know, what kind of stuff do they sell, Palos? Is it mostly like fruit, vegetables, or is it like everything across the board?
It can be everything. One of our biggest program right now, about 95 people, is in the garment sector, I guess, so handcrafted material. Mm-hmm. But if we were going to expand and work with all vendors, it could be anything across the board.
And then would they need to, so the Lightning channel is opened, I mean, to my knowledge, in most Lightning wallets, the Lightning channel would be open at the beginning during the onboarding process to get the initial liquidity. And then after that, once the liquidity is there, they can continue using that channel. Is that correct? Or do I have that incorrect?
That's correct. That's correct. But the only issue that exists is that the two ways to open a channel and get liquidity. The first way is, the easiest way is use an LSP, and that's what Etta wallet uses predominantly. And the other way, of course, would be to make an on-chain transaction, which usually takes a while to confirm. So most people always think about the LSP route. It's a bit new. It's just in time liquidity, but it's pretty efficient and better UX overall. So yeah, that's the idea.
So the one method is the LSP, and the other one are just in time channels.
Yeah, if you use the LSP to open a channel as soon as while you're onboarding, that if you pay, you pay a small fee really, but that's just in time liquidity.
Yeah, I've been experimenting with that in the last couple of weeks or months, and I have some working now, but I mean the fees are still the same basically for opening a channel. You're just taking it off whatever you're receiving. So if you're receiving $15, the whole opening and potential closing fee will be taken off. So it will still be the same amounts, 5, 10, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and maybe
it's convenient in that way that you don't need to have Bitcoin to start with to pay for the fees, but the fees are still the same.
But maybe just to clarify, the fees are the same for the opening and closing of channels. But once the channel is opened and the LSP you're connected to has good liquidity on its network, on all different routes, it might be cheaper, significantly cheaper to move the money around. So, for example, if all the people had wallets and open channels to the LSP, which LSP is run by the Innovation Hub, that would mean that the Innovation Hub will be in charge of routing all these payments and also opening channels. And it would offer maybe every new channel, every new wallet onboarding, every new user some liquidity to begin with. Say maybe 5,000 sats, 10,000 sats to begin with, and then maybe they could use that to pay for things and then get experience of Lightning, and then from there just see how it all works all together. That would make some sense, maybe, I think.
So I'm just trying to think, like also from a research perspective, because Paulos obviously has built this relationship with this group of people who are now in the hub. So trying to think out loud in terms of some research questions that we can ask, because I guess the opening of the Lightning channels and the fees is very relevant, but that's relevant depending on your earning potential as a vendor. If I'm selling garments and my garments are, I don't know, $50 a piece, then it still is quite impactful because it $10 would be a fifth of $50. But then if I'm selling potatoes or apples and fruit, you know, $10 fee is not something that I would be most inclined to. So like some of the questions that are coming up in mind in terms of the research questions could be things like you would interview different vendors and you would go all the way across the board. And one of the questions would be, do you currently have Lightning channels which are open? What pushed you to open the Lightning channel? And I think it would be very interesting to see if people who are in the lower income area, you know, the material, the things that are selling are in the lower area, if they indeed do have channels open and how they felt about opening that. And also very curious which wallet they're using. Would also be very, very interesting to know as well. So I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud in terms of questions that we could ask them.
I think the only way this, also just at your point more, the only way this I think would work is if the hub itself was, in a sense, the one opening channels to these users. Because then they could control how big the channel actually is, and the hub could afford to lock up that liquidity on chain. So the hub can afford to do all this because it's the hub, and they'll ensure that all the channels stay open with the wallets that you have onboarded. So if the hub was an LSP of sorts that determines how much liquidity a person has. So even if you're a vendor that say, if you sell tomatoes, if you sell clothes or whatever, it doesn't matter because we give you a large enough channel, say that maybe $500, that big maybe, and that could allow you to basically do your trades. And basically it would mean like if there's an ecosystem of trade going on, you buy from here, you go buy bread from here, then you go sell another garment, you use that to pay for a loan somewhere else over Lightning. If that was the process in the community, that would make sense because that means that they'll use the same channels to move money around themselves. So there's no need to actually have larger channels. It just makes sense that way. I think that's what would make sense. So the people are not opening their own channels, they're opening channels to Innovation Hub, rather the other way around maybe. So it gives them large enough channels.
So if I understand correctly, the Bitcoin Innovation Hub would be the LSP.
Yeah, that's how this would make sense, in my opinion.
And how would that benefit them in terms of the fees, the Lightning channel fees? I want to try to understand that part.
Yeah, so because opening a channel involves always actually locking up liquidity on chain. So if you want to open a channel that's say 1 million sats large, it means someone has to lock up the liquidity on chain. So that means as long as it's in the channel, you can't spend it. So only the hub in this case would have the capacity to do something like that. So the users themselves would have to then open channels by paying a very small fee, maybe 1,000 sats, and that gives them a channel on the hub because the hub is opening channels to the wallets themselves. So they don't pay much. But now because they're in the same community and they're all using the same wallet and routing payments to each other, it means that their routing payments were basically free of charge and they didn't have to spend that much money to open up a channel that big because the hub would have those channels open and maintained. And it will lock up its own liquidity on chain, knowing that the money is floating within those channels one day. Yeah. That's how I see this working.
Carlos, you're nodding your head. Is this something you maybe thought about or?
Yeah, so excuse me, because part of, I'm learning as much in this process as well as I'm pretty new to the Bitcoin space and Lightning especially. But sounds like there's great alignment there as part of the 3 steps for how we could onboard users. One is, training them and gaining a vocational skill. 2 would then be them in this situation, the way Colin's described, utilizing the hub and working with the hub before eventually at some point, and correct me if I'm wrong, they wanted to have their own channels, which then they could do. But I guess my question would be, does it, if at some point they don't need the hub, what would that look like in terms of fees costs for them after we've already onboarded and gone through these first two steps?
I mean, if the hub is just another LSP, so if they just have to send their Lightning sats to a different wallet, and that's how they exit. Because the hub essentially owns the hub will close the channels with them, and that means that the channels will be closed with whatever is on different parts of that channel. So yeah, everyone I guess gets their share and gets out. So
Okay.
they're not reliant on the hub specifically, not really.
I guess, okay, so, right, so would they, in the future, would they need to rely on the hub? Also, do they need to close the channel with the hub? Could they keep the channel open and continue without the hub? Does that make sense?
In this case, because the hub would be the LSP, the hub would essentially be able to close channels from the users because they open those channels themselves. But of course, it's a joint closure. So that basically means that they could start the process of closing the channel with the hub, and we could also see how that could work in the UX flow of I want to close this and move my money elsewhere. We could figure out a way to make that process a bit easier. That's more localized, I guess. Yeah.
And sorry, I'm going to continue to ask questions. When it comes to just-in-time access to this, these channels or these liquidities, the way I understood it is you don't have to pay all costs up front. You can pay them later. Is that how that sort of works?
The costs, which costs?
Opening a channel.
They would have to pay the cost upfront, but in this scenario that I'm thinking about, the hub would take up the large chunk of the cost of opening channels to the users, so that they're not having to spend a lot of money that they want, because the channel has to be as big as you want it to be, and the hub can open really big channels. And if they can do that with their own money and lock it up on chain, that would be fantastic, and it's a really good way to incentivize this process. But if they have to open their own channels, it will depend on the fee at the time on chain. It would depend on a bunch of things. If the fee is like it has been recently, the least you can actually pay is $5. So, and that's before the fee for channel opening and all that, which would be expensive, really expensive. So the only way, again, the only way I see this working is if the hub would take up the being the LSP as a role and ensure the channels stay open and also close channels on demand. Yeah, I think that's how this would work.
Sorry, I'm just diving in terms of this. So let's imagine the scenario where the BTC Hub is acting as the LSP, and by acting as the LSP, they're helping to reduce the channel fees. And Paulo, please stop me if we're losing you here in any way. I think something that we would need to think about is how to gauge from this group of people what is the amount in stats per percentage according to what they sell that they would feel comfortable with paying for channel fees. So this is like saying to someone like, hey, you're going to a restaurant, for example. I'm just using practical example. You're going to a restaurant and you're going to give a tip. What sort of tip are you comfortable with paying at the restaurant? You've had a meal of 20 euros, you're comfortable with paying 2 euros. Because I think that's quite an interesting question, because it also shows how much of responsibility BTC Hub would be willing to take on in terms of acting as the LSP. So I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud in terms of questions. Yeah. So okay. Are there any other questions that are coming up? I mean, we have Daniel listening in and Christoph listening in and Vidushi as well. Anything that's coming up in terms of questions or ideas as we're talking?
Well, I was just thinking through what I think Colin was describing, and it sounded to me like the sort of model that LND Hub had with Blue Wallet. But if I don't know that technical solution in depth, but if I'm correct, I think that is sort of a custodial model, right? Like the hub pretty much has all the funds, right? It's not, there's not a concept of the users actually holding their funds on their device, which might be fine. I'm just trying to clarify here.
Yeah. So the way I think the difference here would be in the LSP model has its drawbacks, and most of it is the fact that you do give away some of your privacy. They do, if they open a channel to you, it means they have the liquidity on their end. They can just pass it on to you, basically. So that has its drawbacks. It's not. It doesn't mean that the money is not essentially yours. It's essentially the LSP's money. But what this does for you is it gives you, I guess, the experience of self-custody in the sense that you're able to move funds beyond just with the LSP. The LSP is your link to the outside world. So let's say they have a network, they pair with other LSPs. So maybe the guys at Phoenix or other larger LSP networks. So the whole point would be that the LSP is your link to the outside world, and they're able to route payments for you, etc., and all that. But however, the fact is, Lightning that's fully non-custodial might be really hard to work with. To be honest, it has a lot of issues that it makes sense to actually have some. You have to be able to compromise in a few areas, I would say, for it to actually work in this way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not. I don't think this call should be for deciding a particular solution. It's just to open questions and finding
Solution.
the sort of the landscape of potential solutions. And in that realm, I think it might be worth at least having on the table, some of the other options out there like eCash and Cashew, Fedimint, just at least to familiarize yourself with them, because they're somewhere on that spectrum as well. They're sort of not completely self-custodial, but they're also potentially not trusting just one node and one person. I mean, they're all also very, very young and sort of emerging. So yeah, just throwing that out there, that it's worth kind of weighing up all the options and all the potential pros and cons, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with Daniel. I think it comes from also speaking with these users, and then in the back of our minds having the options, the solution space completely open in terms of what would be the best solution for them. Paulos, are you familiar with eCash at all? Or I'm still learning about eCash myself, so I'm not the one to give the explanation, but are you familiar with eCash?
Is that the one that Callie has worked and presented on the last time we? Okay. No, I think I'm still learning much about it, and Cashew as well.
Daniel, would you like to give a quick rundown on what eCash is? But I'm not the eCash expert.
Yeah, I'm not either, but I can give like a one paragraph explanation. So eCash is a concept that is sort of almost like a layer 3, if you like, or it is still using Lightning. But yeah, it basically acts like you were describing, that it acts, well, then there are two implementations of eCash, Cashew and Fedi, which are two different protocols based on the same idea. It's possible that they will be interoperable in the future, but at the moment they're not. And the main difference, I think, is that Fedi and Fedimint, which is sort of a company building out this idea, is that is based on the idea that like a community that trusts each other sets up its own mint together, and they're sort of like all using that one, which is a bit like the L&D hub example we were giving before. So within that mint or within that community, they basically pay no fees. and the cashew one is operating on the same principle, but instead of one community operating one mint, there's sort of a you can start your own mint, and then you can then send and receive from other users on other mints potentially, and you can decide yourself which mint you sort of trust, and you can sort of move your funds into that. So that's a very brief and probably not very simple description, but it does solve some of the problems that we were discussing, that like end users don't have to pay to start using it. Somebody has to set up the sort of central mint, but after that you're sort of good to go as a new end user. You can immediately receive money, and I think there is a wallet out there called eNuts, which is based on the Cashew protocol, which you can test if you want. I managed to receive money there from Cash App in the US, to this. So it does, you can receive Lightning invoices and stuff. So you're sort of on the Bitcoin network, but with this intermediary.
Thank you.
We're just sharing putting all of the options on the table, which I think is a good thing to do. I want to move slightly into now. Let's say we're going to have conversations with these users, with a few people, so that we can actually understand, their feelings towards Lightning channels. Would that be something for them? Possibly the BTC Hub acting as an LSP, or possibly something more like the eCash route. So let's say we prepare a list of sort of 10 questions or 5 questions to sort of get this information, which we can then feed back into this project to try to understand their needs, try to understand, what fee amounts they would be comfortable with, what sort of interactions would be more suitable to this community that they're living in. And that they're working in, obviously, because there's trust in that community between the members, and then they also have a sense of trust, I guess, with BTC Hub Africa as well. So those are all things to consider with whichever solution might be the best for them. In terms of like interviewing these people, would we be interviewing them in their native language? I'm guessing it would be Swahili. Would that be the language that they would obviously be speaking in if we were to interview them?
If that is that question for me?
Yeah.
Okay. From my experience, I think it maybe depends on the vendor, but from what I found, people are okay with just using English. But Colin could probably speak to that better than I can.
Sorry, I grew up in Uganda, born and raised. So in Kampala, everyone speaks, okay, not everyone, but people have a fair sense of English. And, if you think about like all the branding and where everything is basically in English. So I think it comes down to maybe how much deeper this is supposed to go, like how, I guess, rural the project would scale out to. But if you're thinking about just in the city center, then I would say, everything is in English. The menus for even USSD are in English. You can change to Luganda if you want. But in most cases, English is pretty decent as well. I think it just goes back to scale. If you come to Kenya, then people here speak Swahili all the time. Everywhere you go, it's Swahili. It's not mostly English, but they do speak English as well. They do prefer to speak Swahili. So Swahili is spoken everywhere you go. The same way that Luganda is spoken in most areas in Uganda. So localization is good because it helps people who haven't, and this goes back to literacy and all that. Sometimes there's a literacy issue, and that's very, very common. It's a big problem as well. So it goes back to that. But also, once you understand who the user actually is and how many people come to the hub and what language you speak, and also how wide you want to scale out, I think you can actually add other languages as well.
Okay.
And I guess the other thing would be considering the refugee communities. Meron and others there that can translate to Tigrinya, which has actually been needed. There are translators available for that, and she and others can definitely work with them or with us to get those questions and translated and asked to them as well.
Amazing. That was my next question.
Yeah, Paul has raised a big issue, which I think I didn't consider, the fact that these are mostly, some of them will be refugees. So then in that case, I think it would be fair then to really consider the language thing that might be important, really important.
Yeah, I think, just from a perspective of wanting to get full, complete honesty from people when you're speaking with them, it obviously feels much more natural to speak in your own language, or at least the language that you're the most comfortable speaking in, so that you can get the most full-fledged out answer. So it's which is my next question, and I think Paulus, you already mentioned that. Let's say we create a list of questions, a list of interview questions. We'll really try to keep it short and sweet, with a particular goal of understanding like what the problem space is, as well as what might be, we want to go into the problem space so that we can understand what could be the solution space, specifically with regards to the channels, the fees, the trust as well, I guess, would also be something that we need to establish, because if that's there with the BTC Hub, then the BTC Hub could act as LSP. If the trust is not there and there's more trust within the community itself, then it would feel like maybe the eCash route would be something that would be something that they would more lean towards. So would there be people available on the ground to do these interviews? Like if we just gave you like a PDF and like, here's the questions, could we have like people on the ground who would just grab 10 people and have
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, cool. That sounds good. Let's see. Do I have any more other questions here? Yeah. Do you have any idea? I know this is going a little bit off the, I know, Carlos, you're not actually possibly as much on the ground there, but do you have any idea what sort of mobile phones these people have, they have access to? Okay, Daniel says he needs to run, but he looks forward to learning more. Thanks for being here, Daniel. What kind of, do you know any idea, are they using sort of the more very standard phone, which is not your, we here in Europe, we have access to, and in the US, we have access to, the top of the range phones. I definitely appreciate that that's not the case in every single country in the world. I know my mother's 68, she still uses a very basic phone, still learning how to use, the more advanced phones that we have now. So yeah, if you have any idea what sort of phones they use, I think that would, if you don't, it's also fine, but I think that would also be something that would be quite relevant in terms of whatever solution we provide would be the best one for them.
Paolo dropped off.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I mean, people use all kinds of phones, honestly. People have smartphones, people have feature phones. There's really no, I think people will be okay with smartphones, honestly. They'll also be okay with feature phones. That's also very common. But I think in the city, most people have smartphones. But also, I think Paolo can speak to the refugees as well. That's where I really don't have any, I wouldn't know what the situation might be, to be honest. I think you can share more about that.
Sorry, I'm still here. I was going to some documents that I was trying to reference to see if they shared any mobile device type. I can get that answered for you, Mo, and I can work with Meron to find out specifically about the refugee community. But I think, to Colin's point, I think a lot of people that I saw there had smartphones. But yeah, it definitely makes sense. How detailed do you want it to be? Do you just need to know if they're using a smartphone or not, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be interesting to know off the bat, what in general types of phones they have access to, because it's a very practical, question. Because, if it's predominantly non-smartphones, then, a fully fledged, Bitcoin LN wallet is just not going to be a very practical solution for them. It's like, It's like saying go ride a horse and you don't give someone a horse, you know. And so it seems that we do have access to past research that has been done, Paulos, or like you guys like been collecting some past research as well. And okay.
Yeah, again, I guess I just wanted to confirm. Is it more so wanting to understand smartphone or not, or would you like to also go more granular and find out what type of smartphone? And does that matter, I guess, as well?
I mean, if you guys have access to information that's even more granular, you know, why not? I mean, some Bitcoin Lightning wallets are not available on iPhones. You know, I don't know about Etta wallet, but at least most of the Bitcoin wallets are not available for iPhone, you know, users. It's predominantly Android, and I also have an Android phone for that reason. So I think knowing whether it's so, I think the first granular question would be. What type of phones are they working with? You know, is it sort of a proper, you know, is it a very basic phone, or is it something that they can actually use an application on? And I guess the second question then is, if they are using a phone that they can actually use an application on, is it an Android or is it an Apple phone? But yeah, we can also include those in some of the questions that we asked as well. But yeah, I feel like that's it. I'm excited about this. This is actually a very specific group of people, which we have a lot of access to because of the BTC Hub, and we have a very real way in which we can provide a solution for them. And I think it's also very interesting in terms of the fee bit and the opening and closing of channels. And feeling into the psychology of the group as well in terms of what they would be most comfortable with. Because as Daniel said, there's the eCash route, and then there's also the BTC Africa Hub acting as an LSP. So yeah, interesting stuff. I'm going to move on to next steps because we have another call that's coming up after this as well. What feels good for you guys in terms of next steps? What do you think we should do as next steps for this?
Are you so coming up with those questions? Is that something that has come out of this? Are these questions that we've written down already? I've written down some questions as well, but how are those questions going to be formed? Because I would imagine that's part of the next step. And then creating that PDF documentation and going out then and sharing that, and then collecting that feedback from the community. From there, do you need these questions or these interviews to be conducted in a specific way? Should they be recorded, or is it okay if they just collect the feedback from like a form or survey format and then share it? Do you have a preference for that? I guess that's an extra question there.
Yeah, that's a good one. Very situation dependent. You know, I don't know. I'll speak very practically from research that we've done in the community. I've practically done research at a Bitcoin event where I took down notes on pen and paper, which is also okay, but ideally you would actually record it if it would be possible to record. And, you know, I'm just saying that it depends on what's available, who's doing the interviews, what that person is the most comfortable with. The pen and paper option is the most basic option, but when using the pen and paper option, it's very important to write down the exact words that the person says verbatim, as opposed to translating what the person says into what you think they said. So there's that very granular thing that if the person doing how can you say, the interviews is actually taking down notes, that they should write down word for word what the person says. But if they're going to record it, then it's fine, because then we have the recording. So it really depends on who you think would be on the ground doing this and what they would have access to. But I guess you would know that better, Paulos.
Yeah, for sure. There will be some translation situations, though, just FYI. Some of these users are only going to speak in Tigrinya, for example. So we'll have to do some translation. But it's great that let's say if Meron's doing these interviews, that she's the one doing it, because I think she can translate and understand the nuances very well, and share that with us in the findings. So
Yeah, perfect, perfect. Okay. So you think it would be better to do actual like writing down? That would be the most likely solution.
yeah, maybe the most likely scenario would be to write it down. If she can record them, that would be great. I don't know how much they would help if no one else can understand the translations, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But what she can for sure do with the help of others is translate the questions, and also have them written down in that way, so that when they see the questions, they can respond to them. Maybe they can write them down themselves as well, so that we have a direct response from them,
Mm-hmm.
versus us asking the questions and trying to transcribe it ourselves.
That sounds like a good one. That sounds like a good one. I've never done that before, but them actually writing down themselves. Yeah. Okay. It's much more. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, we'll explore both options, but as you mentioned, I think what we may find is the note taking and the transfer of the information might happen through that format instead. So I'll keep that in mind, and I'll share that and see if Meron has other creative ways of doing this.
Perfect. So next steps from my side is I'll create a Google document with just outlining a little bit of the background about the project. I'll add in a list of possible questions that we can use to do some initial to do this investigation, ask questions, understand this community of people, and then we can collaborate on those questions together. So we decide on those questions together. It's not me deciding what those questions are. And then we'd also, lean into the Bitcoin design community as well in terms of asking questions. We lean into Christoph, into Daniel as well, to try to understand what would be the best questions to ask this group of people. So yeah, and then once we're all comfortable with the questions, we then basically get it on the ground, and then these interviews are basically done. And yeah, that's pretty much it. How does that feel for you guys?
That sounds good. I wish we could have like a review of how the things go. I think that's going to be reliant on Meron and them once they ask those questions and have sort of conversations amongst themselves. And I think in that moment it would be important for them to share that feedback as well. So I'll again work closely with Meron and others that she assigns the task of translating and working with individuals. Fortunately, she has a wide range of people that are there at the hub, from different communities, whether they're Sudanese, Ethiopian, or Eritrean. She knows them all, and so I think we won't have any issues there. So yeah.
I think there's a very special thing that we have, use case that we have access to here is understanding in small communities like this, the trust. Because, I think what will be very interesting is understanding the trust that they have for BTC Hub, and then also the trust that they have within the community as well, because that essentially decides which Lightning solution is going to be the best. That's one of the deciding factors as well. And yeah. So okay, cool. So I'm gonna hop off now. Thank you everyone so much for the call. I'm going to stop the recording, otherwise I will forget. So let's see, stop recording.